Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our channel, AI Era Islamic Abrahamic Wisdom. Today we're going to be discussing Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir's book, The Foundation of Islamic Jurisprudence. Specifically, Volume 1, Sub-Volume 2, which focuses on Hazrat Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. May God be pleased with him. Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we're really digging into the foundational principles of governance from, well, a truly crucial period of early Islamic history.
It's so much more than just history, though.
Yeah.
What we're looking at here is the establishment of a whole philosophy of the state.
Right.
If our last deep dive was about stabilizing the new government, the big picture policies, the military strategies, this segment, this is where we get to the soul of the state.
A good way to put it.
We're shifting from, let's say, geopolitical survival to the domestic character, the inherent rights and dignities that were guaranteed to every single citizen.
Absolutely. And the source material, it kicks off with a quote that it sets the tone perfectly for this whole discussion. It says, "A state becomes strong through its army, but a nation becomes great through its compassion."
And that is the pivotal shift, isn't it? Abu Bakr understood that, yes, military strength could secure territory, of course, but only internal justice, only systemic compassion could actually secure the loyalty and the long-term health of the nation.
So he was building what the source calls a moral state.
Exactly, a state defined not by its conquest, but by its commitment to the rights of its citizens.
So our mission today, as we go through cases 73 to 80, is to really meticulously unpack this blueprint. We're looking for these 8 core principles he laid down, the ones that united law, mercy, and human dignity.
In essence, we're charting that moment where, administrative necessity, it evolves, it turns into institutionalized empathy, the focus moves entirely to building domestic justice and really inviolable rights for citizens.
So where do we start? Let's unpack that first pillar,
Here you go.
the state's responsibility for its weakest members.
Well, let's do it.
Okay, let's start with case 73. The creation of the constitutional welfare system. Now, this wasn't just, a suggestion that people should be charitable. The core decision here was the formalization of a mandatory state-run welfare framework.
And that word formalization is everything. It's the key. Because historically in the Arabian Peninsula, social support was. It was a family affair, a clan affair.
Right, your tribe looked after you.
If your tribe was wealthy, you were safe. But if you lost that connection or your family fell on hard times, your fate was, well, precarious, to say the least. Abu Bakr fundamentally changed that entire dynamic. He centralized that responsibility right under the state treasury.
And the priorities, he said, they tell us everything we need to know about his vision. The source is very clear about the target groups, widows, orphans, disabled individuals, and, interestingly, new converts who needed financial help.
Yes. And by explicitly making those groups the priority, the ones without traditional protection or those who had just joined the community and didn't have a social network yet, he deliberately flipped the traditional power structure on its head.
How so?
Well, think about it. Instead of state funds automatically going to the established elite, the powerful families, the successful warriors, they were redirected first to the most vulnerable. It was a complete reordering of priorities.
The book gives a really powerful example of this. The formalization of state pensions, specifically guaranteeing provisions even for women who lacked a male guardian. Why is that specific detail so profound for its time?
Oh, it's a game changer. Because it solved a massive systemic vulnerability. For a woman in that era, losing her husband or her father or her brother, that could mean immediate poverty, a complete loss of social standing.
She'd be reliant on the charity of distant relatives if she's lucky.
Exactly. So by guaranteeing her a regular, reliable state pension, a pension independent of any man, Abu Bakr was installing this constitutional layer of financial security. It elevates her status from, an object of family charity to a rights-bearing citizen whom the state is legally obligated to support.
I have to ask about the logistics of this, the administrative challenge. How did they even manage to centralize welfare back then? They didn't have spreadsheets or digital records.
That's part of the genius of it. The funding, of course, relied mainly on zakat and other state revenues, but the administrative challenge, as you say, was immense. It meant setting up dedicated people in all the regional centers, scribes, treasurers, whose specific job was to register the eligible poor and make sure the payments went out consistently.
So a very early form of bureaucracy.
A very moral bureaucracy. It was all built on the integrity of the local officials handling these funds. Any mistake, any lapse wasn't just an accounting error. It was seen as a failure of the state's most sacred duty.
So the big lesson here, the really crucial shift, is that Welfare transitioned from being viewed as charity to being enshrined as a constitutional right.
Precisely. You weren't just hoping for someone's generosity anymore. You were making a legal claim against the state treasury, a claim based on your status as a citizen in need.
It creates a sense of ownership, a stake in the system.
And if you want to connect this to the bigger picture, this is the very foundation of social contract theory in action, centuries before European philosophers even formalized the concept. This system is the direct ancestor of modern Social Security, state pensions, and dedicated welfare ministries.
It established that a legitimate government has this foundational, non-negotiable duty to prevent its citizens from falling into utter destitution.
It's a publicly funded safety net, one that protects human dignity just as much as it provides financial relief.
Okay, so having established that the state must protect the vulnerable, Case 74 then solidifies who is protected, and the answer is everyone. The core decision here was a crystal-clear declaration that all citizens enjoyed equal rights under the law.
Regardless of their past, their ethnicity, their tribal affiliation.
And that is a huge governance challenge, especially in a state that was just formed out of recent, often bitter conflict and deep-seated tribal loyalties.
For centuries, power and privilege were defined by lineage, who your ancestors were, how influential your tribe was. To just abolish that entire hierarchy with a single constitutional declaration of equality under the law, that is politically revolutionary.
The specific example the source uses is vital here, I think, for understanding the risk he was taking. It was the policy of treating the newly reconciled tribes.
The ones who had just fought against him in the Ridda Wars.
Right. Treating them with full respect and trust, not with suspicion or punishment.
The Ridda Wars, the apostasy wars, had just ended. They were brutal. Many tribes had violently rejected the central authority of Medina. Simple political pragmatism might say, treat these people as second-class citizens, impose heavy taxes, restrict their roles for a generation or two.
That would seem like the safer option, wouldn't it, to secure the state?
Safer in the short term, maybe. But safety through punishment only creates resentment. It guarantees future revolt. Abu Bakr understood that true, lasting security comes from integration and loyalty, not from coercion.
So by declaring immediate, full equality,
he transformed defeated enemies into vested citizens. Their past was forgiven, their legal standing was restored, and their loyalty was earned because the state demonstrated it would respect their rights.
Which brings us to another powerful constitutional concept from this period. Citizenship serves as an inviolable shield protecting the individual, not merely a privilege granted by the state.
Yes. It's not something the state can just revoke because of political convenience or some historical grievance. It cemented the move from a loose federation of tribes into a true civil state, one based on legal personhood.
It's fascinating, this early concept of universal non-tribal rights. It feels like a direct precursor to modern constitutional equal rights clauses found all over the world.
It is. It establishes the rule of law as the ultimate equalizer, stating that the authority of the state and its duty to provide justice transcends all those old inherited social divisions.
Okay, so if the first section established the rights of the citizen, Section 2 seems to be about the mechanism that actually enforces those rights, the thing that shields them from arbitrary power.
Exactly. Now we move into the structure of justice itself.
Starting with Case 75. Mandating judicial independence.
And this is the bedrock, the absolute bedrock of any civilization that can claim to be governed by law rather than by the whims of men. The core decision was a clean, explicit administrative separation.
Separating the judges, the judiciary.
From the governors and military officials, the executive branch.
Why was that separation so fiercely protected? I mean, couldn't you argue for efficiency, just have the regional governor also serve as the highest judge? Seems simpler.
Simpler, yes. But efficiency is the enemy of justice when power is unchecked. Think about it. If the governor who collects taxes, commands troops, and executes policy is also the judge, what happens in any dispute involving the state, or an official, or an ally of the governor?
The state wins. Every time.
Every time. You simply cannot have impartial justice if the judge reports to the person who is effectively a party in the case.
The source really brings this to life by mentioning the empowerment of jurists like Qadi Shareh. He was given the power to rule strictly according to the law, without any fear of political blowback.
Even when powerful figures were involved. And Qadi Shareh is a monumental figure here. His career is the living embodiment of this independence. There's a famous story, though it's from slightly later, where he actually ruled against a caliph in a dispute over a lost shield.
Against the head of state.
Yes. And the very fact that a judge could even hear a case against the supreme ruler, let alone rule against him, shows you just how powerful and deeply embedded this principle of separation established by Abu Bakr truly was.
So he was intentionally building a systemic check on his own office, on the caliphate itself.
Precisely. He was creating a legal system that could outlive him, that could resist the inevitable decay of power into authoritarianism. The state was fundamentally declaring the law is the master, not the ruler.
Which brings us back to that profound statement from the source. Justice cannot breathe if power suffocates it. The long-term impact of this is, well, it's hard to overstate.
It's incalculable. It laid the foundation for the enduring principle of judicial independence that is the hallmark of modern constitutional government. It's the essential firewall. It protects against corruption, cronyism, and arbitrary rule. If citizens believe the courts are fair and independent, they trust the entire system, even if they disagree with specific policies.
It secured legitimacy, not just obedience.
Exactly.
But of course, an independent judiciary is only as good as the judges themselves.
Yeah.
Which leads us right into case 76. Competence and ethics in judicial appointments.
Yes. And the core decision here was that appointments to the bench were strictly merit-based.
This was probably the most culturally challenging move he made in the legal sphere, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The appointments valued knowledge, honesty, and a calm, suitable temperament. The criteria were objective, based on performance, not on the traditional measures like tribal status, family wealth, or even age.
Which, again, directly challenges that entire structure of society we talked about, where status came from lineage. Why was it so important to break that link for the judiciary in particular?
Because the law is about logic, integrity, and application. It is not about who your grandfather was. If you appoint a powerful tribal leader as a judge just to keep his clan happy, but he lacks the legal knowledge or the ethical backbone to rule fairly against his own people, the whole system of justice just collapses.
Abu Bakr needed jurists who were loyal only to the law.
Only to the law. And the source highlights something truly revolutionary in the selection process.
The choice of young but brilliant jurists over elderly candidates.
Yes, over elderly candidates who might have had the status but lacked the specific judicial temperament for the job. This is where you see real intellectual courage. For centuries, the elderly held authority in legal matters because age was equated with wisdom.
But he was saying that's not enough.
He was saying it's not the only thing. By prioritizing brilliance and temperament, that specific psychological strength you need to weigh evidence impartially over mere seniority, he professionalized the judiciary. He was willing to risk a social backlash from respected elders to ensure the highest quality of justice.
So the central lesson from this decision is a powerful one. The law is upheld by competence and ethical character, not by mere seniority or social standing.
And that standard is timeless. This policy is a direct precursor to...
We start with case 77, reinforcing women's rights and social protection. The core decision was that Abu Bakr actively reinforced and ensured the implementation of women's rights as mandated by divine texts.
And that's a key distinction. It's not enough for a law to just exist on paper. The state has to be the proactive guarantor of its implementation, especially when entrenched cultural norms might be working against those very protections.
So divine law had already granted women rights to inheritance, to own property.
But local patriarchal customs often found ways to, let's say, creatively interpret or simply ignore those rulings.
The source points out that he personally monitored this. He made sure that widows received their stipends, got advocacy, and this is the key phrase, received respectful administrative treatment. That suggests an awareness of bureaucratic bias.
That phrase, respectful administrative treatment, is so insightful. It tells you the caliph was aware that even if a woman was legally entitled to the money, the process of getting it could be made slow, humiliating, or require her to confront male officials or relatives who were hostile to her claim.
So by personally monitoring the process,
he was making it clear that administrative dignity was a constitutional requirement. He was protecting women not just from poverty, but from institutional harassment.
why was that level of personal oversight needed for women in particular?
Because of the power imbalance. In a dispute over inheritance or a stipend, a woman might be up against her own powerful male relatives or local officials who felt that tradition gave them the right to override the law. The caliph's direct involvement was the ultimate leverage. It was the weight of the central state, ensuring her rights were respected without her having to fight a long, costly, and often hopeless battle on her own.
So the underlying lesson here is foundational. The constitutional principle that a state that neglects or ignores the rights of women is inherently weakened.
Absolutely. A state that allows half its population to be marginalized or economically insecure is inherently unstable. This policy ensured that economic resources like inheritance and state stipends actually flowed back into the hands of women, which stabilized entire households and, by extension, the whole economy.
It's directly linked to modern concepts of women's economic empowerment and protective laws, designed to counteract gender-based economic disparity.
Without a doubt.
Okay, but rights are worthless if you can't afford to get to the courts, or if you're too intimidated to confront the powerful.
Yeah.
Case 78 seems to address this head-on. It's about guaranteeing access to justice for the poor.
Yes, and the core decision was to implement a system that guaranteed direct, unhindered access for the poor and the weak to lodge complaints, not just with any official, but directly with the caliph or his top governors, without fear of intimidation.
This feels like an acknowledgement of the structural limits of any formal legal system.
Yeah.
You can have independent courts, but the cost and complexity can still shut people out.
It's an administrative bypass for urgent or egregious cases of injustice, a
Yeah.
rapid response system.
And the mechanism the source describes is very physical, very public, setting aside specific days where the weakest citizens could speak directly and freely to the leader.
This formalized the concept of the modules, the public audience, but with a critical twist. It prioritized the voice of the powerless. It meant the caliph, the most powerful man in the state, had to physically and psychologically put himself in a position to hear the complaints of a shepherd or a destitute widow. It often required him to step in and immediately correct official misconduct on the spot.
That sounds incredibly risky and, frankly, overwhelming for the central government. How did they manage the inevitable flood of complaints? Surely many of them were minor or even frivolous.
That's the constant tension in any system built for radical accessibility. But the wisdom of it lies as much in its symbolism and its deterrent effect as in its direct case processing.
What do you mean?
The simple knowledge that any poor person could bypass the local governor and speak directly to the caliph, that acted as a massive deterrent against low-level administrative abuse. Local officials had to be far more meticulous and fair because they knew they could be publicly overruled by the highest authority at any moment.
So the lesson is that justice must be both theoretical and practical.
Right. Justice must be physically and procedurally accessible. Otherwise, its theoretical existence becomes meaningless for the majority of the population.
It's the direct ancestor of modern legal aid systems, public ombudsman offices, and citizen grievance centers.
All of which exist because we recognize that poverty and a lack of resources can prevent the law from being applied equally. This policy was an attempt to bridge that gap between legal theory and social reality.
We're moving now into our final section, which focuses on accountability. Limiting the power of state officials and establishing the core duties of the government itself.
This is where all the previous principles get their teeth.
Case 79 details the establishment of zero tolerance for abuse of power. The core decision was simple but sweeping. Any official found oppressing a citizen was subjected to strict discipline, regardless of their rank or position.
This is the critical constitutional check that ensures all those other policies, equality, welfare, independent courts, are actually implemented. Without rigorous accountability, the whole system just degrades into words on paper. Abu Bakr made it clear that public office was a sacred trust, not a source of personal entitlement.
And the example the source provides is so telling. It sets such a high moral bar. An instance where a governor was removed from his post.
Not for theft, not for military defeat.
No, simply for insulting a citizen who came to him with a complaint instead of properly addressing it. An insult.
This is where we see the deep insight into the moral economy of this early state. Removing a high-ranking official, a governor, for a verbal slight that sends a message that echoes far beyond the single act. It defines oppression very broadly.
It's not just physical violence or stealing money.
No, it's also the casual dismissal of a citizen's dignity. It's the arrogance of office. It's the psychological abuse of power.
What were the long-term effects of setting the standard that high? Why was he willing to fire a governor over something that seems, on the surface, relatively minor?
Because he was prioritizing the constitutional principle of citizen dignity over administrative convenience. The effect was that every official, from the most powerful general to the lowest tax collector, understood that even a minor transgression against a citizen's dignity could end their career. It created a culture of deep respect and caution.
Power is granted by the state to serve the people, not to dominate or exploit them.
That's the principle. This case established that the primary measure of an official's success was not their efficiency, but their ethical treatment of the people they governed.
This really is the enforcement mechanism for the whole legal framework. It feels like an early version of ethics commissions and anti-corruption bodies.
It acts as an internal moral regulator for the executive branch. The accountability was instant, it was public, and it was applied regardless of an official's past service or political connections. That institutional commitment to integrity is everything.
Which brings us to our final case, Case 80. This addresses the most basic function of any government, state responsibility for public security.
Right back to the foundation. The core decision was declaring public safety and security a sacred, fundamental, constitutional duty of the government.
It makes sense. If a state guarantees rights and welfare, it has to guarantee the physical safety needed to enjoy them.
Exactly. Without security, trade stops, people are afraid to leave their homes, and the entire social and economic fabric just unravels. Abu Bakr framed this not just as a policy, but as a non-negotiable sacred duty.
And how was this implemented? It wasn't just a declaration, was it?
No, the source details the practical steps. They established organized systems, patrols, night watches, community guards, all specifically tasked with protecting neighborhoods and, crucially, the trade routes.
This marks a shift from informal sort of self-policing to a formalized state police force.
A critical transition. The night watches provided domestic security, which allows for a functioning society. The organized patrols on trade routes secured commerce, which was the literal lifeblood of the new state. By investing state resources, manpower, organization into security, they recognized that economic vitality and social order are directly linked.
The administrative complexity must have been huge, trying to coordinate that across such vast territories.
It was immense. It required a centralized system of communication and reporting. It meant ensuring that local security forces were accountable to the central government and trained to follow specific protocols, so they didn't just become rogue militias. This standardization meant security was delivered reliably, whether you were in the capital or in a distant border town.
So the ultimate lesson of Case 80 is clear. Security is not optional. It is a fundamental prerequisite for a functioning state, and is the government's primary responsibility to ensure.
Absolutely. This early framework is the definitive ancestor of our modern public safety departments. It establishes that the cost of security, the personnel, the organization must be paid by the state for the common good. A society can't focus on justice or welfare or education until the basic threat of physical harm is systematically managed by the government. This decision institutionalized peace.
So we've now mapped out 8 profound, interlocking constitutional principles that were established in just the initial years of the caliphate, all drawn from cases 73 through 80. They really do form the foundation of this ethical state.
And it's worth synthesizing them just to see how they fit together. They form this comprehensive system of checks and balances, all designed to uplift the average citizen and limit the arrogance of officials.
Okay, let's list them out. First, state welfare as a legal right. Welfare is an entitlement, not charity. Second, equality for all citizens. Your citizenship is a protective shield, no matter your background.
Then you have, third, an independent judiciary. Justice is protected from political power. And fourth, competent and ethical judges. The bench is filled by merit and temperament, not by status.
And the final 4, make sure these rights are actually real and that officials are held accountable.
Right. Fifth, women's rights and proactive protection. The state actively ensures those rights are implemented. Sixth, access to justice for the poor. Systems are in place so the marginalized can be heard directly.
Seventh, zero tolerance for misuse of official power. The dignity of the citizen is paramount. And finally, eighth, state protection of public safety. Security is a sacred constitutional duty.
The entire structure is built around a single revolutionary concept for its time. Governance designed explicitly to uplift the weak, restrict the powerful, and preserve the dignity of every single individual.
It shows that for Abu Bakr, stability was meaningless without internal justice.
By institutionalizing empathy and accountability, he created a political structure that was anti-fragile. When an official abused their power, the system corrected itself quickly and publicly. When a citizen was vulnerable, the system gave them a legal entitlement. This moral integrity was the source of the state's long-term legitimacy.
It wasn't just law. It was conscious, ethical state design.
You essentially have the foundations of a comprehensive Bill of Rights and a structure for limited, accountable government, all established in the first couple of years of the Caliphate. It's a remarkable feat of constitutional architecture.
A legacy that offers profound lessons for governance even today. Now, looking ahead to our next deep dive in this series, Episode 11, covering cases 81 through 88, we're going to explore what the sources call economic justice, public finance, and regulation of state power.
That's right. We'll see how this same moral rigor was applied to managing the state treasury and the economy, tackling things like equitable distribution of wealth and ensuring financial responsibility, building a morally just economic system from the ground up.
We'll leave you with the closing reflection from the source material that perfectly sums up everything we've explored today. Justice builds law, mercy builds society. Abu Bakr, as-Siddiq, R.A., combined both and created a state where every citizen had value and every life had dignity.
And for our final provocative thought for you to consider, if the foundation of a great state is compassion and constitutional rights for the vulnerable, what single measure of success best defines whether a modern society is meeting this ancient standard today? Is it the integrity and accessibility of our courts for the poorest among us? Is it the speed with which we discipline bureaucratic abuse? Or maybe it's how we define who counts as vulnerable in the 21st century.
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into foundational jurisprudence. And please subscribe our channel and like, please, and also share this video to your friends. We'll see you next time on AIAW.